so funny because I've wanted to have a vegetable garden for so many years, and where I live, I have so much wildlife in the yard, you know, between the deer and the groundhogs and bunnies. I can't grow anything. Anything that just comes up and starts to bloom gets eaten usually. And we had several years ago for my dog, just so she's safe in the yard, if we can't be out there with her, we put a big enclosure with a fence around it because we're surrounded by woods. But she's so codependent. She literally goes down the steps if we're not with her, stays near the steps, and comes right back up. So she's not using this yard. So last year, I started, you know, I had started to work a little less hours after getting laid off, one of my jobs. And I said, this is the summer. I want to have this vegetable garden. That's really where all this started, you know. I said, Jasmine's not using the yard anyway. I'm going to put this garden in. So I, you know, planted a plethora of different vegetables. And, you know, as issues came up with each of the plants, because everything's a learning experience, one of the things that really shocked me was with zucchini was I did not know that there are male flowers and female flowers. I don't know why. I just assumed every bloom I saw was going to get a zucchini. And what I did notice was I really didn't have any bees. I had very few bees and very few butterflies until this started, you know. So it was after I put a little hummingbird feeder near the plants. Of course, the bees were attracted. I guess somehow they smell the, you know, the sugar water or whatever. Then I got some more bees in the yard. But yeah, so I mean, think about that. Even on a big scale with farms, I was talking actually to a beekeeper that's at our local farmers market, and a lot of the farms by us are actually renting out the beekeepers to put their boxes in the fields for the bees to pollinate their plants. So it's helping both industries, you know, with that, because there is a lack of bees, you know.
Wow.
Not many bees now.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because living, I suppose it's probably because I live in the middle of Los Angeles, you know, but I used to see and be a little more closely aware of these things when I was like living in the country in Indiana and, you know, in the middle of all the fields and, you know, everybody always talking about it. But I suppose it's because I live in the city that I don't have a whole lot of awareness about all of these little tiny aspects of seeing our ecological system kind of starting to deteriorate. And so I read about them in little places, but I don't actually see them myself. And it's pretty fascinating that in your backyard, you're able to kind of see this micro ecosystem playing out and how different things affect other things. And it's like, it's kind of neat.
It is really neat. Yeah, it's so funny because, you know, we've talked about Reiki before in our other podcast, and Reiki really opened my eyes to just really seeing even insects as, you know, a being, you know, more so than, you know, kind of like, oh, butterflies are pretty, you know, bees, watch out for bees, they sting, you know, and you don't really look at each animal as something that's really necessary on a food chain. I mean, it's really easy to step on a bug, you know, especially if you don't know, you know, or, you know, spray a bee or something if you don't want them near your food or whatever, you know. And it just really opened my eyes to seeing that everything's really here for a reason. I mean, I knew that, but even down to the little smallest insect, you know, is so important.
Yeah.
And, to really protect them. And so the funniest thing was you know, so I was really into gardening. That was really my whole thing. And one of the women that I work with was trying to protect the monarchs. That's where it started. And was going on vacation and asked me if I could foster a chrysalis that she had, because she was afraid it was going to hatch and they were going to be away. That's where it all started, you know. And I'm like, well, I don't know anything about butterflies, you know, what do I need to do? And so I started to, you know, read about monarchs, started to read about the only plant they eat is milkweed. So I'm like, all right, what does milkweed look like, you know? And bought some seeds, and I put a couple of seeds in the yard. And, a couple weeks later, I had plants, maybe they were, I don't know, 3 or 4 inches high. I mean, really tiny with a couple little leaves on them. And I just happened to be outside in the yard and I saw a monarch butterfly come in and kind of light on each plant and flew off. And I'm like, wow, I wonder how she even saw that, like how do they find that? Not even thinking that she was actually laying eggs when she was there. So maybe about, a week later, I'm down near where the little plants are, just making sure, there's no weeds around them or anything. And I saw a couple of little caterpillars on the plants, and they looked like tiny little white inchworms. And I thought, oh, great. Now I have caterpillars and they're going to eat these plants before the butterflies can even. Not thinking
funny.
that, oh my gosh, those are monarch caterpillars, So sure enough, that's when, again, I'm on Google all the time. What do monarch caterpillars look like? And they do look like little inchworms when they first come out. And then I did notice on some of the other plants, these tiny little, like the size of a pinhead, little white balls on the bottom of each leaf. And those were monarch eggs on them. So I left them thinking, okay, they're, I'm going to get butterflies. How exciting. Went back out there and they were gone. There were about, 4 or 5 little caterpillars and they were all gone. And that's when I noticed the wasps hanging around and the ants. So I'm like, all right, this can't happen. I like put the milkweed down. Now something's going to eat them. So I called my friend. I'm like, what do I do? She said, well, just next time you see caterpillars, put them in something, bring them in the house, put them in something.
Like a cup?
So I'm like,
what?
Okay. So I ended up buying a butterfly habitat on Amazon. This is how this is like progressing now, right? Yeah. And you can see them on there. They're anywhere from like $10 to $100, depending on the size that you want. They're like these collapsible 4-sided nets. And the holes are small enough so wasps and smaller insects like ants can't get in there to get to your caterpillars, right? So I'm like, all right, what am I going to put the caterpillars on? Because they need milkweed to eat. And they were on these tiny little plants. Honestly, they only had like 2 or 3, 4 leaves, on each one. And they eat really quickly. I mean, those tiny caterpillars within like a day or two now started to get beautiful yellow bands on them. And all the leaves were gone. They were like clinging on a stem. So I put it out on my Facebook page. I'm like, I have 4 or 5 monarch caterpillars. They need milkweed help. Where can I get milkweed? Yeah. And I can't tell you how many people that I know got on there, posted pictures what milkweed looks like, told me fields near me where there's milkweed. So the problem with milkweed is when you go to pull it out, when it's a big plant, it doesn't come out of the ground with the roots and everything. So now I come home with this fresh milkweed. I'm putting it in water, but you have to be careful that the caterpillars don't fall into like an open vase because they'll drown. So you have to get like, a soda bottle, with a small space. I put tin foil around the stem so nothing could fall into the water. And like every 2 days, I was going out collecting milkweed from fields. So this is like on top of working, on top of because I wanted these caterpillars to have a chance. Then I saw more caterpillars born on the tiny little plants. So I ended up, I was at one of my nurseries and I saw they were selling milkweed in pots. So I ended up buying 3 pots of milkweed that had bigger plants, like mature plants in it, to put in this habitat so the caterpillars just could eat it. So I spent money now on plants for the caterpillars to eat, actually,